Folks, we're going to start. I'd like to welcome everyone to our pre-Halloween edition of the Ward 1 NPA meeting. And we're going to start the meeting off by self-introductions. So my name is Tom Darenthal. I live on Nash Place, which is across from Centennial Field. And
I'm Carol Livingston. I'm on the steering committee and I live on Calarco Court, which is just below the cemetery down Colchester Avenue.
sorry about that.
I'm Karen Long. I live on Henry Street.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Mila Grant and I'm the police commissioner doing the presentation later. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jake Schumann. I am a resident of Pilgrim Drive, and I am running for the East District City Council seat.
Hi, my name is Catherine Hill. I live on Farrell Street. I'm supporting Jake Schumann.
Hi, I'm Lynn Severance. I live next door. It's hard to get here.
Sorry.
Take an Uber.
Oh, yeah.
Richard Hilliard, I Grove Court, over there.
My name is Jackie Sokol. I live right up the street of North Prospect.
I'm Carter Newbeezer. I live around the corner on Colchester.
Hi, I'm Dina. I live on Riverside Avenue and I'm also the City Council nominee for the Progressive Party.
Hey everyone, I'm Rob Gutman and I live on North William Street. I'm Jonathan Chapel Sokol. I'm on the steering committee and I live on North Prospect Street with Angie.
Hi everyone, I'm Achilles Lakosu and I am the school commissioner for this ward for the school district.
I'm Susie Monka, lives across from Francisco Park.
Earhart Monka, I live in Sydney.
And we've also got some people online. Dave, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Dave Colley. I live in Nash Place and also part of the old 10.
Sophie?
Sophie Quest. Sophie Quest from the Old East End. Old East End, yep.
Okay. Sharon? Sharon, you're on mute.
Sorry. Sharon Busher, East Avenue.
All right.
And we have a couple of new folks.
And who just came in?
No one tells you.
Good evening, Chris Salato. Okay. Welcome. And just a couple announcements first. We do have food outside and meaning out of this room, not really outside of the building. And it's from Alici Masala, which is on the corner of Colchester Avenue and East Avenue. And just another announcement is that if you have received, which I believe everyone has, a ballot for the November election, there was a piece missing. That's the CSWD ballot. It's for a bond issue for the solid waste district, and you have to request that separately. So it was not mailed out in the packet.
So my understanding is you call city clerk and they can mail it to you, or you go down when you're submitting your ballot or whatever, and you can give you one then. And it wasn't supposed to be, I don't know, we don't understand why it wasn't all part of the package, but it's important issues, so we just want to flag that for you.
All right, we're gonna start with Speak Out, and I'll start with introducing some of our candidates. Tanya, do you want to You have the floor, you can
Sure.
tell us who you
Actually, come up there, okay. Where was your name?
I suggest you take this one.
Okay.
are. I'll look back.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. I'm Tanya Binowski. I am a representative right now in Essex, and I'm running for state senate to represent the Chittenden Central District. Chittenden Central is most of Burlington, all of Winooski, a tiny sliver of Colchester, and most of Essex. I am a social worker and have done a lot of work in my life as an activist and organizer, and I'm really running to make sure that everyday Vermonters are represented in both bodies of our General Assembly, in the House where I fought for things like just cause eviction, and to make sure not only that we moved that policy, but that we heard from tenants who had been evicted in the committee room. It was really important to me, and my chair said to me, like, oh, don't worry, the housing commissioner can speak to that, but I know from my own experience growing up in a single parent working class home and from my work as a social worker, that it's actually really important that we hear stories from the people experiencing them. And so I really want to continue doing that work in the Senate. We lost some really important people in the Senate and some people who should have retired maybe a long time ago. And we've got a lot of open seats there. And I think we have a real opportunity right now with almost a third of the Senate and more than a third of the House turning over to put people into those seats that actually get it. I'm a renter because I can't afford to buy here. I am one of the many Vermonters that went away to college and couldn't afford to come home. And I hear over and over and over again the rhetoric around, like, how do we keep people here? We pay them, we create affordable housing, we make accessible affordable childcare, and those are the things that I want to go fight for, not speaking for you, but opening the door for you to come speak for yourselves. So that's me. I am happy to take questions. I'm happy to I can run to my car and get contact information because I was running late, so I didn't think to bring it, but that is just my quick intro, and I don't want to take up more of your time because I know you have a lengthy agenda to get to.
Great questions? Choir group tonight.
Is this typical?
Well, thank you. All right, we also have candidates for city council. So. Jake, you want to kick this off?
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Jake Schumann. I was asked to express what I thought was the most important issue to the East District. I played with it in my mind. There were a lot of things that I wanted to say are the most important issue to the East District because they're the most important issue to the city. But I'm going to try and keep it focused on the East District.
Excuse me, Jake?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, the question was Ward 1.
Ward 1.
Which is where we are right now.
That's very good. Thank you. Thank you. I think the what I was planning on saying is still valid.
That's fine.
So the way that I would respond to that question is I think that for Ward 1 specifically, even more so than the rest of the city, what's very important is the city's relationship with the University of Vermont. I think that when we think about the housing crisis, we don't think about the issue of homelessness among the University of Vermont community. And I think that it's really unfortunate that when we think of the homeless community in Vermont, we conjure an image of this archetypal human being who has done things wrong and has messed up and is bad for some reason. And I would say that there are a lot of people in our community who deserve housing, and there are a lot of people who are in our community who have housing who deserve better housing. And I think that if we engage the University of Vermont in good faith, bring them to the table and leverage what we can, then we can work with them to address our housing crisis in a very meaningful way. Thanks. I guess before I give the microphone back, I'd just say if you want to learn more or get involved, you can email Jake, the number 4 btv@gmail.com. Thank you.
Before we let you go, though, I should have
Yeah.
asked this before. Can you just give us like the 2-minute version of your background?
Yeah, thank you. For the prompt, my background is in human services and social work. I've also worked in human resources, personnel type stuff. I am currently an EMT. I've also done policy work. Most recently, I spent the last year working at DCF Central Office in their policy shop. I also in 2012 and 2013 helped write a bill that became the 2014 an act relating to equal pay. There's a lot of stuff, but we'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there questions? Yes. Richard.
Would you just like to say a couple of words about public safety? Because your predecessor voted for defunding the police. Your predecessor was very agenda driven without being neighborhood driven. And would you please address that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So the question for those folks who might not have heard online was about public safety, how to address it, and how the previous East District City Councilor voted to defund the police. I would say that the public safety issue is very difficult to compress into easily digestible sound bites, but I'm going to do my best. I think that in 2020, there was a national movement and it got a lot of attention focused on police and the problems in policing. I think that there was a lot of emotional thinking and reasoning around that issue. And I think that, you know, whether you agree that he was successful or not, Moreau had put in efforts and tried to bring our police force into a new era. I think that was his stated goal with installing Brandon Del Pozo as chief. I think that some reactionary folks maybe moved a little bit too quickly, and maybe there was not as much thinking around the process and the engagement and the way that it was done. But without relitigating the past, I would say that moving forward, the way that we deal with public safety is trying to put it in a nutshell. We need officers to be able to respond to all the calls for service that we get, but we don't need people with guns responding to all of those calls. I support the expansion of the CSO program. I support addressing the social determinants of health and helping people so that they do not find themselves in these situations where they are running afoul of the law. Thank you.
Other questions? All right, thanks a lot.
I have a
Jake.
question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Jake, thanks for being here. Very prosaic, but how many city council meetings have you attended and what were the main themes when you were there?
You know, I can't say I've attended like a whole bunch of city council meetings, but over the years, I'd say probably like 1 or 2 a year. Yeah, just general city council meetings.
I ask only because I think sometimes there's a tendency of candidates to run without understanding really the workings, the sort of brass tack stuff that has to happen to run city government.
Yeah.
And I do know we had a candidate recently who won, and when she was asked about the pensions, she didn't know what a pension was. And I find that concerning. So I would hope whoever is running, whoever wins the seat is pretty well versed in some of the simple, like complicated issues that, and sometimes boring, honestly, and prosaic that have to be addressed.
Yeah, I do appreciate that because I very much agree with you. And I'd say that the reason I don't go to city council meetings is because they're boring. But I have friends who serve on city council and I have friends in the state house. And I follow the news that comes out of those spaces. So that's why I don't go, is because
You'll be going a lot.
Yeah, well,
There'll be a lot of boring meetings.
well, I will be going on the campaign trail. So I'll see you at the next one.
City council meeting?
Yeah.
I have to go regularly for work, so I am often there.
All right, we'll see you then.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Any questions from people online? Seeing none? Dina. You have what?
Hi, everyone. I want to first thank everyone for coming here, for taking the time to be here. So I was nominated to run for city council. And one of my main focus is public safety. I work in the courthouse, so a lot of the issues, matters we all address with, they end up on my desk 5 days a week. And that's my whole role, is to deal with like the town issues and the state issues, and having the responsibility and helping each person maneuver through the court process. And I watch family cases turn into criminal cases. And I believe my focus on public safety is seeing the interconnections between them all. If we want public safety, we have to look at housing. If we're trying to build affordable housing, we have to build affordable housing in sustainable environments. If we want to increase public safety, we have to make sure our kids are having schools are increased funding. I do work with the Lucy School District, and a lot of these kids, they live in environments where there's violence, there's drug abuse. You know, we just can't, there's so many little moving parts that I really want to focus on, you know, like just like to get calls where parents have relief from abuse cases. And I always think to myself, this kid's being exposed to that matter. And one day they might be in that same position. So I care about public safety. I care about building that foundation, because we can't build a home without a foundation. And that's my role. I'm a new American. I immigrated to Vermont at 4 years old. And my parents came at winter time. They didn't know much English and they weren't providing the resources. So I had to grow up early. I had to learn how to create solutions for myself. And because of that, because I understand what it's like to have an issue and not have someone that can provide you the door. So you have to go make the door yourself and open that same door. And that's why I believe having a member who works in the courthouse and who handles these problems firsthand, I think that's what the council need, a fresh perspective. We need someone with a law background who can help pass bills because they have the legal knowledge to do so. And housing is such a big problem for me because my mother worked 2 jobs and we lost our home. We didn't have heat for months, 5 kids. And she wanted to bring us affordable housing. Her first concern was, is it a safe environment? Gun violence happens because of young people, because oftentimes they aren't in a safe environment. And that's my focus. And thank you for listening.
Any questions? Yes.
Yeah, could you talk more about your upbringing? Because if I remember right, you come from a working class background. I wonder if you could talk more about that, because I also did, and I really appreciate when elected representatives do.
Yeah, of course. So I'm a child of healthcare workers, and I think since the pandemic, healthcare workers are being so overworked and they're exhausted, and a lot of them have kids at home. And when my parents became healthcare workers, they told us, they're like, we're not going to be home a lot. We need you to look after each other. And like, that's how I see things. If we want to improve, if we want to increase public safety, if we want our kids to have resource education, we need to make sure we're working with each other. And I think whatever the working class family, you have to fend for yourself. And when you experience that, you learn a lot. I was a legal intern for a litigation law firm. I'm 18, I was the youngest person ever. And I handled employee harassment cases. I handled cases where workers their rights were not protected, but they had to work there because if they lost that job, how they going to pay rent, how to keep their kids in school, how they put food on the plate. So oftentimes the workers just stuck with it because they felt like they weren't protected and they felt like this was their only option. So studying that for a year, and then next thing I'm working close with Lucy School District. I think I'm just always working for working class families because I know it's like to not really having the support, and suddenly you're the only person looking after yourself. We have leaders who say, yes, we'll help, we'll bring change, but nothing's happened. And I'm done asking for better. I'm ready to make it, and that's one of the reasons why I'm running. And that's why all of us are here. We're done asking. We just want it to happen already.
Did you grow up in Burlington?
Yes, I've lived here for over 14 years. Yeah. I went to Bryce Memorial High School. I had the privilege of having privileged education, but that came with my parents not home. And that's oftentimes what happens, like we have to sacrifice so much of ourselves to have one little good, but it's like, that shouldn't be that. You know, I really want to focus on the way look how we spend money, the way like taxes, like these need to go back to the schools. And I think the issue also with like the police, with the police department, like we need to create more unity. I think it's more, I really want to increase meetings like people of color to be sitting down with the police department, because I work with the police department in my courthouse. So because I'm already working with both sides, I'm ready to have these meetings, these gatherings. Like we can't move forward if there's no unity, if there's not listening. I mean, I know the answer to all the questions, but if I'm listening, then I can work with you. I'm not here to say I know the solution to every problem, because I don't. But if I can listen, then I do, and that's why I really enjoy mediation, delegation, sit down. So that's why I'm here tonight, and that's what I'm going to keep doing. Yes.
I appreciate your perspective and the work you do at the courthouse.
Thank you.
As a city councilor, would you fight to ensure that there's always a DBPO and a police force domestic violence prevention officer?
Yeah, so domestic violence, I'm so glad you brought it up. I mean, you work in social work, so you understand. A lot of social workers, there's not enough of them, and they're not getting increased funding. So I'm very much open to seeing possible solutions, you know, like what you brought was a great initiative that I would be open to. I'm coming to city council because I want people of Burlington to say, this is my idea. This is what I want to see, and be listened to them. I don't think city council is about making this decision. It's about listening to the answers. And that's something I 100% be open to, because I know people in the police department and they really care. So it's like, how can we bring them forward, say, hi, some people are upset with us, but listen, this is what I do, and I really do care about the community, and I know that. So that's my role. And they just cannot just, I really just want to put on a pause and bring merge unity and better communication.
Other questions?
Give it to me all, I can be here all night.
Questions from
Thank you.
people online? Oh, Sharon?
Yes. Hi, thank you for putting your name forward and for running. I'm sorry I couldn't be there tonight to meet you in person, but I don't know much about you, but I'd like to know, how long have you worked at the courthouse? And then the other candidate was asked how many city council meetings they had attended. And I'm interested to know that piece. And if, when you were in school, if you ever were part of a legislative process.
Yeah, so I've always been a community member and a leader in the community, and that's always been my platform, was the community. And I think, I mean, I've attended all the city council meetings. I attended like once a year because I was with the community. You know, I feel like the real conversations happens in rooms like this, and that's definitely what I care about. If I was on the city council, I'll still make sure I'm attending the town meetings, the town gatherings. I think that's where the real work starts. And in college, so I was a D1 athlete in college, and like a lot of students here, I was working 2 jobs to help support myself in college. So while I wasn't able to be part of a legislative bill, I was a double major, and I worked a lot with law firms, and I worked a lot with teachers, and just, I mean, educating myself. I think my goal is to help pass a bill. I think having some of the legal knowledge to know how to maneuver that process, because oftentimes, for example, like the just eviction got shut down, and I see them like, okay, is there anything we could have done through the law to have pass it? I think that's my strength. I think that's what we need here. Did I miss another question?
How long have you been working in the courthouse?
Yeah, so I was very fortunate enough. I got hired in April, and I started working there around June. And I've been trained to have expertise in criminal, family, civil, probate, eviction cases. So it's been 4 months of just like really gaining my expertise, and like I deal with like 40 clients a day. So it's a lot. And I know like, and it always, a lot of things I see in the news, like I happen to talk to that person, and they called me like, hi, I have this issue, what can I do? And I'm really excited to bring like that into city council. And I really want to focus on educating townspeople about their rights, because I think that's another way we can help protect ourselves if we know our rights. And that's something to help with housing.
All right,
Can I ask?
yes,
Well, I know, you grew up on Riverside, and I feel like, there's a disconnect between the New American community and some of like the regular city meetings like these, like city council. How do you imagine or do you think you can play a role in sort of bridging those things?
Yeah, so when we first came to America in wintertime, my dad knew he had to drive. He knew we needed a car to get to one place to another, but he was still learning English. So what he had to teach himself how to drive. He teaches my mom how to drive, and he started teaching people in our community how to drive. You know, like a lot of these issues we're addressing about, like I'm not gonna assume, I think it's like I might be like Achilles, because I know we're both like the New American people in this room, but if we're talking about these issues, like everyone has to show up. And I think my role now is increase translators. So we want to like increase unity between like the police department, like we need to make sure we have New American people in there too, because oftentimes they live in the homes where there's a lot of like criminal activity and like drug abuse. Because like from my experience, we can't afford to live in nicer places, and that's a reality. But if we're not getting them here, how can we really affect change? You know, like they need to be here. I want to increase translators. I know my dad speaks 5 languages, so he was so happy to start bringing people in and translating. I know so many translators. So I really want to bring them here and tell them like, let's bring everyone along. We are a community, so we have to look like a community.
all right, any other questions?
I'll be around to provide any more answers. I don't have a conversation. Actually, you guys questions?
Actually, I was going to, if folks are done asking you questions, Tanya didn't get a lot of questions earlier, so I was going to ask her a question. That's okay, we can go back to that.
Okay, so let me interrupt here just for a minute and make a few observations. Okay, the first observation is all these people who ask questions were not heard by people online because they didn't use a microphone.
Oh.
Okay, so that's what this is. Okay, so people.
But you got her.
Oh,
You're okay. You're okay.
Thank you. I'll be around. And I actually have a question for you, so I'll ask mine after.
Okay, so my second observation is that so our previous speaker was standing like this, so all people online could only see the back of them. Okay, so I suggest the person stands, so the camera is set up this way so that people who are online can feel that they're part of the meeting. So they're looking like this, so we can see everyone except the speaker. Okay, so at the very least, you should like turn around and do this occasionally or something. Those are my observations. So the room has certain limitations, and I just wanted to point those out.
Thanks.
Thanks, for running. Could you just talk maybe about 1 or 2 pieces of legislation that you worked on as a representative that you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the bills that I'm really proud of that I moved forward was a mental health expansion bill that sets up a workforce development task force that looks at it does a lot of sort of boring licensure things that unless you're a mental health professional, you don't really care about. But the most exciting part about that bill was setting up this workforce development task force that didn't just name commissioners to a task force. It asked the Vermont Center for Independent Living, which is a disability rights organization, to put someone on the task force. It asked Outright Vermont to put someone on the task force. It asked the New American community to put someone on the task force. And to really look at not only how are we growing our mental health workforce, but how are we diversifying our mental health workforce? Because I know when I look around the mental health workforce, it is largely upper middle class white women. And if we're truly going to provide mental health care, we need to make sure that we have representative mental health care. And so while I was being asked by the people who work in the same field that I do to really look at how do we diversify that field, because without a doubt, there is a crisis in that field. It wasn't simply about bringing more numbers in, it's about who are we bringing into that field so that it's truly representative. I was also really happy to fight for the voter expansion bill. So universal mail balloting was something that we passed through my committee, and two of the committee amendments that I was able to add to that I was really excited about were electronic ballot curing. So ballot curing came over to us from the Senate, and I was able to expand that to electronic ballot curing. And previously, if you made a minor technical error on your ballot, it got thrown out and marked effective and you don't get counted. Now, if you make a minor technical error on your ballot, your town clerk will call you and say, hey, you made an error, would you like to fix it? And as long as the error doesn't mean you have to revote, you can email them an affidavit, fix your ballot and have your vote count. The other piece that I was able to add into that bill was around primary voting. So it was really confusing this election cycle. I talked to so many people during the primary who said, I'm just waiting for my ballot to arrive. And I had to tell them it's not going to, because we didn't do universal mail balloting for the primary. And the Secretary of State's office was really oppositional around that. And what I was able to do was to get a feasibility study that will come back to the legislature in December of 2023 to tell us how we roll that out for the primary as well. Because I think it's the more consistency we have, the more engagement we have. And I think for us to really save our democracy and to really fight for a democracy that includes everyone, we have to have that kind of engagement. So those were a couple of the things that I worked on, but I worked on a lot of things. Like I said, I really fought for the just cause eviction bill. I fought for all of the Burlington charter changes because I really feel like that direct democracy that comes out of our towns shouldn't be stopped in the legislature, especially a legislature that, if you actually look through it, isn't representative of the demographics of Vermont. So there's a couple things. I mean, I could probably go on and on, but I won't.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Here, I'll take that.
I think, Dina, did you have a question?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
No
So,
worries.
a lot of my work includes working with social workers and family cases, and oftentimes the problem they bring up to me is just that there's not a lot of them, they're not getting paid enough, but there's so much children needs help. What's your response to that? And like, what plans do you have to help support that? Because I think that's a very big issue that we're having right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly the bill that I talked about to really expand that workforce is part of that. And the reality of it is we are having across our mental health system, across our healthcare system, a real crisis in workforce. And I think we really need to look at how we invest in those workers. Those are low paid jobs. You know, I didn't go into social work because I thought I was going to get rich doing it. And as I said, okay, I have a master's degree and I rent because I can't afford to buy here. And so we need to really look at, like, how do we forgive student loans, whether or not someone is working within a qualified health organization. Perhaps they need to do more work if they're working, you know, whether it's in private practice or whether it's with DCF, or maybe it's a percentage. If you're working with X percentage of people who have Medicaid, or like, there needs to be some metric that allows people to do this work from multiple angles and not carry. I mean, I have $60,000 of student loan debt, and I have paid off student loan. When I was in grad school, I worked full time. I was a graduate teaching assistant so that they would help pay for my education. I went to school full time and was able to pay down my loans a little bit. But the reality of it is that we are making these low paying jobs that are largely women doing this work just unaccessible. And so we have to really look at how do we incentivize people to get into this field by paying them better wages, by forgiving their loans, by providing support. I work in private practice now, and I'm on my own. Like, if I'm navigating something, there's nobody to talk to. So I think there's a lot of different avenues. I had a really great event at Northern Vermont University talking to first generation college goers about like what they wanted to do. And lots of them are like, no, I want to go into business. I want to do this. I want to make money. Because of course, statistically, our first generation college goers are people who grew up in poverty, grew up in the working class, and they don't want that for themselves. So if we want more people in the human service fields, we have to pay them. We have to make that a field where they are not going to scrape by and wonder if they can afford their rent this month. And I don't have the magic solution, but what I can say is that from my own experience and from the experience of the people that I work for, I will be there every day advocating from that lens. I hope that answers your question. Okay.
well, thank you very much. We're going to move on to the second part of Speak Out. Do people have things that they want to bring up?
Great.
Go ahead.
Thanks.
Number one, I brought a couple signs if anybody would like them about supporting the high school. We really need a high school. I think, I know. And people are gonna stop moving here if we don't have a high school. Macy's, they're trying hard, but my granddaughter's there and it's just not great. But as far as public safety, I agree with Jake that we need more people without guns, just kind of holding the line. And around the high school, so my granddaughter lives maybe a quarter of a mile from the high school. She lives on Elm Terrace. And she will not walk to school because she has two ways to go: down her street through the park, Smalley Park, which often people are sleeping there in their sleeping bags. And then on Lower Church Street to get to the high school, or she can go on Winooski, South Winooski, and go to the high school. She's now 15 years old. Last year as a 14-year-old, a freshman. She had some really scary experiences. So this year it's ridiculous because my daughter drives her to school. And she grew up living on Henry Street and walking everywhere, or taking the bus or riding her bike to the high school when it was on Institute Road. So I think we don't need, and I've been writing our counselors, I don't think we need policemen with guns down there, you know, kind of rousting up people who are having to sleep on Church Street. But I think we need people down there helping them. And, you know, and I don't agree with Richard that we defunded the police. I believe we were trying to rearrange funding so that we met all the needs of our population. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks.
Just general comment. Yeah, and just going off what you said, I mean, the reality is that the police budget was one of the only budgets that didn't get cut year over year during COVID. We did rearrange the officer count, and the officer count wasn't just picked out of the hat. Stephanie Seguina, who's well respected in terms of being an academic in this field, compared us to cities all over the country similar size, and we came to that officer count based on data. We haven't hired the unarmed officers, and that's not because the council didn't approve that months ago. It's because the police department hasn't hired. And I understand that hiring is difficult, but you know, I don't think there's any question there. And the other thing we have to say is, like, overall crime and across the board is down. That is just a fact. Instances of gun violence have spiked. Instances of drug abuse and overdoses have spiked. Instances of mental health crises have spiked, and that's true in the most conservative counties of Vermont. So I just think, like, it, you know, it's a tough issue, and like there's no perfect answer, and I don't know the perfect answer, but like there's been so much misinformation flying around. And I'll also say our outgoing counselor did vote for the public safety transformation. So did the majority of the other party as well, and the mayor signed that resolution. And so when it was politically convenient for the other side to champion the issue, they championed it. And they certainly said this is where we're going, and took credit for it when 2,000 people, the most public participants at any city council meeting in history of the city, showed up. But then when it became, you know, a little more politically dicey, or when the police union decided they could use this as a cheap talking point and spread fear in our neighborhoods, all of a sudden we're walking back from it. And the police union putting out every time there's a violent incident, you know, implying that someone getting shot downtown is the fault of the city councilors because they have a policy disagreement. I mean, that is so out of bounds. Like when we talk about partisanship and like not acting as a community, like that is just so frustrating. Like, how do you even have a conversation at that point if the other side is saying you're responsible for a murder? Like, I mean, we're just, I don't know. Anyway, that's my reason.
We're gonna Erhard, you got a quick one?
Yeah. Just very quickly, and not to pile on, I mean, I think Karen and Carter both expressed what I feel.
Erhard, a little louder.
Sorry, Karen and Carter both expressed what I feel pretty pretty well and strongly. I'll just add on a quick anecdote. I was at the Vermont League of Cities Town Fair for work last week, and happened to talk to a couple folks that live over in the Connecticut River Valley. And just overheard them saying, "Oh, I'm never going back to Burlington again. It's so dangerous there." And this is what is happening with the politicization of this issue. People don't want to come to Burlington. And Vermonters think they're not safe if they come to Church Street. It's crazy. I've lived here since 1976. Crime has gone up and down. Our house got broken into twice 10 years ago. And it hasn't since. I mean, it's just politicizing this issue has gotten us nowhere, and it has just scared people away from Burlington. It has scared money away from and economic development away from Burlington, and it's scaring people in town unnecessarily.
Thanks. We're gonna move on to our next agenda item, which is a little bit different from our original agenda. And we're gonna hear from Akilas, who's gonna tell us about what's going on with the school district, which is probably another political hot potato. So,
Remember
And here's
to
a-
take the camera.
okay, there's the camera. Awesome. You were,
All right, well, for people who don't know me, my name's Akilas. I grew up here. I'm actually next to the neighbors with Dina. I know some of the faces here. I know that, of course. I was elected this past March to be your Ward 1 school commissioner, and so our biggest agenda right now is passing this bond so we can put our kids into a real school environment. And so this is what I have to say. Just a little update from the board as a whole. With the board and community volunteers have been busy informing our voters on the need for a new high school, and why it's important for you guys to vote yes. The bond is asking to be given the ability by the bonding service to borrow $165 million from the bank as it is needed. So we need this amount to do the work that we need to do in order to put our kids in a sustainable, normal school environment. This is the amount that we need, and this is the amount that we are pushing for. The board and district administration are continuing to pursue state and federal grants, both private and corporate philanthropy, and other funding possibilities that will lessen taxpayers, so we're not to borrow the full 165. So, the 165 number is a little bit of reach, and so we are pushing for it to be lowered. But time will tell. There hasn't been too many changes in the last couple of weeks, but we are aware that taxes going up is a huge thing, and that might hinder people to vote yes. And so, which makes sense for sure. Some of the federal and state grants that we'll pursue need to have the bond capacity in place to be able to apply them. So this is why it's really important for us to push a narrative for, our ward to, vote yes, but also, continue the conversation outside of our ward and, make sure that we're all on the same page, because, it's really about the students, about the kids in our community. We as a community have to come together to make our voters understand that the yes is so important. And there are so many ways that we can all get involved in, making this thing come true. We all like to say that, it takes a village to, raise a kid, but it takes a village to, build a high school to put our kids in them. And so I just think it's really crucial coming up in these next couple of weeks. It's going to be very evident that the conversation is there, and we just have to push it and make sure that we're doing it right for our kids. Like you mentioned, there are some signs here. I can try to get more signs for us and bring them. This is my first time actually at an NPA meeting. I have a lecture around this time, but today got canceled. And so Kathy asked me to come in and, give this update because she couldn't be here tonight. But if more signs are needed, then you can definitely reach out to us, Kathy or I, and we can do that for you guys. It's just really important that, we do this, and the time is now. Yeah, thank you guys.
any questions?
That
Nina?
Yeah.
So my focus is centered around data. So I interned with the Worcester School District. One of my roles was to help them pass support their bill for increased funding. I did a lot of data work. And my job is right across the mall now, so I talk with a lot of students. And my question for you is, do you think increased data that shows statistics of why the school needs increased funding would help, or why do you feel like no matter how much data we've shown that it still is a big issue?
I think taxpayers and taxes are a big reason why people don't want to go forward with it. You know, a lot of what I've been hearing is that, the school board wants to put so much money towards this new building and make it this new 21st century high-tech development, but I just really think that people are scared of taxes going up and it's gonna hurt the economic development we have in Burlington. And also people are obviously just, you know, have the respect their own opinion. So I think if we just, you know, answer those questions and, you know, make sure that we're all on the same page, then they'll understand what's really going on. To answer the question. Yeah.
So just to put it out there on the record, I'm all for voting yes and funding and building a new school. I'm just curious if you can speak to maybe some opportunities for saving that this school will bring us, right? So if we have a more efficient school, like we're gonna save a little bit of money every year in our school budget. And I'm also curious about like future proofing to a certain extent. So it's like technologies change, we have a new form of classroom that we want to integrate, or maybe we decide that we want to scale our classes up or scale our classes down. Like, in what ways are the building that we're building going to be able to get bigger, get smaller, move walls around, things like that?
Yeah, so to answer your first question, a lot of our work this summer was, you know, applying, looking for grants to, you know, minimize the cost. I will say that there is a good amount of things that I cannot, you know, speak to right now in this room. And so I kind of want to stop myself there, but to answer your second question, could you please ask it again, because I was focusing on the first question.
Yeah, and just to clarify, like I wasn't really necessarily saying like, I assume, like I think it's safe to assume that the school board did the work to make sure that like this building is gonna be built as cheaply as possible. But like, I think like we're gonna build an efficient building, right? And our current building is super inefficient. So
Yeah.
like, I don't know if you could put a number to it, like how much money are we gonna save every year on like our heating costs and our, you know, all that stuff. But the second question was just about future proofing the building, and like as educational styles change and our practices change, like is that being considered so that when we want to renovate the high school 10 years from now to incorporate a new learning style, we can do that as economically as possible?
Yeah, for sure. I think that, you know, right now, let's just build the first high school. And let's just, you know, see how that goes. And then when 10 years come, then 10 years is, you know, a while away. But I think that right now we're just trying to build the space for everyone. Make sure that it's really that it's an inclusive spot and that it draws people to our town, and that, you know, it just creates a sense of community. I know that a lot of our work is, you know, making sure there's spaces for individuals or kids who are, you know, can be part of the larger, you know, part of the large classrooms, you know, having more spaces for them to, you know, learn on their own pace. And I think that is really important for us to just, you know, just include everyone. Burlington we've been just diverse for a while, and it's, you know, we just need high school, honestly. But yeah, I don't think I answered your questions at all, but.
Can I add one thing? I heard that it's gonna be a Subaru, not a Mercedes. You know, I mean, it is very expensive,
Yeah,
but
no, it is.
I had heard that, you know, they really tried to save what they could of building A,
Yeah.
and that it turned out they're just starting over.
Yeah.
And I mean, that school was pretty beat, you know,
Really big, yeah.
for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we passed the money before, because we were gonna renovate it.
Mhm.
And that money was not used. I mean, except for maybe what, some of it for this testing. But that bond that we approved however many years ago, that was not ever spent. So this is like a new bond that is replacing that one we agreed to renovate. But anyway, I thought that was kind of cute. I think it was Jeff Wick that wrote that in a thing about, you know, he's been very following it. He's a school board person and, but that it was a Subaru not received.
Yeah, I also did want to mention that, you know, there's been talks in building a new high school for a really long time, even prior to when I joined VHS 2014. But I think that, you know, the contamination is really what, you know, halted the, you know, let's just keep talking about it and actually put action towards it, and displacing our students and putting them in the department store is really the last line that we really think of. And it's just like not really as like the appropriate environment, you know, like these kids are in a department store. They are in cubicle classrooms, there's no windows, they're in downtown Burlington, there's a lot of distractions going on, so. But yeah, it is more of a security than the city. Thank you for the comment.
Any other questions? I actually have a question.
Yeah.
I've heard, and it's not an insignificant item to do the PCB cleanup. And is anyone working with the EPA to get EPA funding to do the cleanup piece of the rebuild?
I can't answer that. I don't have any information on that.
Okay.
I think, well, Kathy Alwell know well, and I think that they are doing all they can to find funding for anything and everything.
Yeah.
So I would say, yes,
Okay.
they've looked into that.
All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm probably breaking protocol right now. My name is Catherine Burnett. I'd like to actually go back to that issue that you just said we shouldn't be talking about.
The one around public safety, neighborhood safety.
Oh, I don't think I said we shouldn't talk about.
Oh, okay, I thought you moved this away. Is that all right if I bring that back?
Sure.
Okay, so I really appreciate, I don't remember your name, what you spoke about, how there are stories that circulate and then we believe those stories. And so one of the stories living in this neighborhood that circulates is that there are break-ins. I mean, in the last month, there's been a break-in right next door to me, to the east, to the west, to the south, right in my, you know, right in close proximity. And the narrative that's going on is that there's not enough police to be able to have a presence in this area. And so crime is easy to do. And that when there is a crime, such as the break-in, and you know, I lived in Burlington, so I've only been living here in this neighborhood for about 5 years, but I lived in Burlington, let's say 25 years ago, 30 years ago, in a neighborhood that had quite a bit of crime and my house was broken into. It's really horrible experience to have your house broken into. It just stays with you. I know this is an extreme, but it's a little bit of feeling like you've been assaulted with your home being broken into. So what's spoken about here is that there's not enough police protection, and then there's also not enough police to have a quick response and to get to the bottom of why these break-ins keep happening. And I don't know whether that's true or not. I don't know whether that's just a story that's being circulated. I don't know whether really statistically, whether there are more break-ins these days, or you know, it's been going on for a while and I'm just become aware of it. I don't know. But I like to talk about that, or at least to hear perspective on that. I don't want to blame anybody. I don't want to get into a polarized conversation about it. I just want to bring this to the floor so that we can have some attention put on it, or consciousness put on it.
Okay, I just one comment, and that's we are going to have Milo's going to talk about the police commission engagement and
Okay,
I
misinterpreted you. I thought you had
so
the conversation.
now I'm just, well, unfortunately, part of my job is to try to keep on track.
Yeah, I understand that.
So,
Yeah, all right, well, is that right, what you're saying?
yes.
It's really important to hear the discussion and the voices. So we're caught as a steering, we've got this agenda, but we're so glad that you're
Yeah.
here, and it's really important to hear these viewpoints and to talk with one another, trying to get through the politicizing and the misinformation. So it's really important that you're here.
We are very glad that you are here and voicing your opinion. All right, so you, I apologize if I gave you the wrong impression about just cutting it. So we're gonna move on to our bylaws review and vote. Are we gonna do that tonight?
Let's do it fast,
Okay,
because we have a quorum.
Jonathan's, we have a quorum.
I want to do this because we never had 10
And
people in
As,
the room.
as an introduction, Jonathan put a lot of work into creating our bylaws, and we have not had them in the past. So this is a new thing for us.
Yeah, the Ward 1 bylaws disappeared in a file cabinet about 20 years ago. Nobody could find it. And like Gerhard probably has. And Ward 8 has come and will go, and they've had bylaws. But Ward 1 never got it. So I'd love to just do this. We have a quorum. We need, according to the bylaws that maybe will pass, we need 10 people to pass the bylaws. So I'd love to do it right now. And with your permission, rather than read the bylaws into the minutes, I would do the PowerPoint flip charts, and which has all the content and none of the therefores and wherefores. So if I can just get started with this, I don't think this should take too long. I should also say that most of this has been cribbed from the work of Richard on Ward 8 and on a long history of bylaws from other wards in the history of the NPAs. So the name of this organization is the Ward 1 Neighborhood Planning Assembly, referred to as the NPA, the Ward 1 NPA, or what we're hoping we can reframe as the Ward 1 Community Group, because NPA is a little confusing to some people. The purpose of the NPA was to set forth in a resolution adopted by the Burlington City Council in 1982. So many of us weren't even born then. Which stated in part, the Neighborhood Planning Assembly shall help provide citizens with information concerning city programs and activities, help obtain citizen views of city needs, and help provide citizens with an opportunity to participate in making recommendations with respect to governmental decisions, including allocation of revenues. This is what we're supposed to be able to do, and this is what the NPA was formed to do. In addition, the NPA should be organized and operated for the following purposes: create and nurture vibrant communications between residents and officials of the city and institutions within the ward. Maintain and enhance the quality of life in Ward 1. Ensure that the voices of Ward 1 residents are heard in all matters pertaining to life therein. Provide a vehicle for residents of Ward 1 to collectively act so the ward can put together a resolution, vote on it, and bring it to City Council. Increase the level of citizen participation without political partisanship in the civic sphere. Guiding principles of the NPA are to provide a safe and welcoming forum where residents can actively share their voice about issues that matter to them and where they can learn from the voices of others. Cultivate involvement by a diverse spectrum of community members through active outreach and through eliminating barriers to participation. And if we have barriers to participation, you have to point them out, because as us on the steering committee, we really need help, and we really need help to make sure that every voice can be heard, and everybody who wants to participate and get involved. Operate in a manner that models respectful, inclusive, culturally and economically aware practices, and be a fun, creative, vital organization that benefits from and values the multitude of perspectives held by those who participate. I think that's most of the words in the whole thing. So maybe the next page will be shorter. So now it's like membership and responsibilities and stuff. Everybody 14 years and older living in Ward 1 is a member of the NPA. Member rights: participate in meetings, equal vote on all voting matters, including election of the steering committee, serve on the steering committee, receive notices and minutes. Non-members are welcome at meetings without voting privileges and participate and speak out at facilitator's discretion, just to make sure that non-members don't necessarily dominate the meetings. We at least 4 NPA meetings meet a year. We traditionally do the second Wednesday of the month, and we do about 10 a year, 9 or 10. The combination of in-person and hybrid meetings is encouraged. Meetings are warned through CEDO. The steering committee determines the facilitator and the agenda, and a quorum of 10 is only defined for the purposes of voting and not simply meeting. You can have 3 people show up and we'll have an NPA meeting, but there's no proxy voting. So you have to be present either on screen or in person. Majority vote rules, except for dollars, changes to the bylaws, and removal of steering committee members where we want 2/3 of the people present. Votes for money, election of steering committee, CDBG, city advisory committees, NPA resolution and formal communications and bylaws. That's what we do votes on. And just for those of you who don't know what CDBG is, it's the Community Development Block Grant, which assigns, which is a committee which makes recommendations to the city council as to how to spend federal HUD money. And one member from each ward is appointed to that committee, and we have a right to make that appointment for Ward 1. That we have at least 10 minutes for speak out. Article 3. Steering committee should have 3 to 7 NPA members. We currently have 3. Maybe we'll have 4 before the end of this meeting. The youth members and college age membership are encouraged. Election will be at the March meeting. 1-year terms, no term limits. 2/3 are required to remove a steering committee member and must be warned as an agenda item if the group wants somebody to go. Steering committee quorum is a majority of steering committee members. Meeting notifications of 48 hours is required. Voting by the steering committee is by simple majority of the quorum. Vacancies only need to be filled when the steering committee falls below the minimum. So if we have 6 people and 1 person wants to go, we don't have to replace that person. But anytime that there's fewer than 7 people on this, or fewer than 8 people on the steering committee, or 7, and somebody wants to join, they should speak up to join the steering committee. Meeting management, neighborhood outreach, municipal monitoring and oversight, recording and representation to the all awards meeting. Those are the responsibilities of the steering committee. And then we've added a steering committee member conflict of interest statement. This was a little controversial when it was originally written up, but the idea is that a steering committee member has a responsibility to disclose to the steering committee potential conflicts of interest concerning the agenda and voting items. And then the steering committee makes a decision as to whether there's truly a conflict of interest. Conflict of interest does not include any interest that is not greater than that of any other persons generally affected by the outcome of the matter. So let's take, for example, if the subject was accessory dwelling units, okay? Accessory dwelling units, mother-in-law units, or something like not home share, but Airbnb kind of thing. Let's say your Airbnb kinds of thing, where a steering committee member might have an accessory dwelling unit which they rent out. That doesn't mean that the steering committee member has to not advocate during a meeting, but they should say, I have an accessory dwelling unit and I do rent it out. So you should be aware that may be where I'm coming from. That I may have some prejudice or bias in that regard. That's really all that the conflict of interest is. Or if you're going to make money off of it, you really should be telling about it. Like if we offered food and asked you to pay for it and I own the restaurant. That's conflict of interest.
That's not the case tonight.
That is not the case.
You didn't make that religious.
CEDO paid for the food. Article 4, amendments, 20 days notice, warning, 2/3 majority of the NPA. Non-discrimination and public meeting laws. We just say just copy and paste what's on the city non-discrimination and public meeting statements, and that's what we have in ours. And that is the proposed bylaws. Here.
Question, maybe I missed this, but are city councilors or school board members allowed to be steering committee members under the bylaws?
Under these bylaws,
yes.
There's no conflict of interest there.
Okay, so if I'm remembering, and it's been a while, that used to be in our bylaws, in order to prevent someone who might be an elected official from in some way sort of dominating a meeting through the steering committee, or politicizing the NPA by virtue of serving both on the city council as well as on the steering committee. So my suggestion would be to add something into the conflict of interest provision that prevents city councilors and sitting school board members from being steering committee members.
Why, Erhard?
I think city councilor. I think city councilors and school board members are, as elected officials, get plenty of voice. And they are asked to come to NPAs to provide reports. I don't think they need to have that voice further, and they're on the city council or on the school board. I don't think they need their voices further amplified through, and their opinions further amplified by being steering committee members. As steering committee members, I think, your role is to run what Jonathan just described, a good public process where neighbors can talk freely. I've been on the city council and it's been extremely political. It's pretty political right now. And I think we all trust our elected officials, not to do something like politicize the NPA, but I think there's a risk, and I think we should build that into the bylaws to prevent the NPAs from becoming politicized.
Okay, thank you.
Before I get formal about it, are there any other people, specifically, not people, but roles specifically that should be excluded from the steering committee? Department heads, say. I'm asking, I'm not saying that's the case, but I'm just curious. Because if we make an amendment, let's make an amendment and vote on the amendment, vote on this. We haven't had a motion in a second on this yet, but we're more casual than that also. So does anybody think there's other people who should be included in the conflict of interest category? Roles that should be included in conflict of interest? Jake, you go first.
I just say the mayor, right?
Yeah, say the mayor.
Conflicts on the mayor. Sorry for not using my.
I'll just repeat for you. Jake was suggesting that the mayor also be precluded. I think department heads probably should be appointed. Department heads appointed by the mayor, subject to approval by the city council, should also be prevented from being steering committee members. I don't think rank and file city employees should. I think that's different, but department heads, that have.
How about just generally politically appointees?
I like to be more specific, just so that.
Okay.
Because a lot of people are on boards and commissions that end up being appointed by the city council with the mayor presiding.
Good point.
And so my preference would be to stick to specifics.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
So why don't we play pretend? And Zariah's here. Hi, Zariah. Let's pretend that we're like the real thing. And could I have a motion to accept the bylaws as presented?
Can I have
Karen.
one other question?
Sure.
Do you think 10, just so that I've gone to these meetings for years and years, sometimes, like, I don't even know how many we have here besides people working here, 10 seems like a pretty big number to require for a quorum.
Okay.
Do you think? I don't know, what have the meetings been?
I think we've gotten 10.
Yeah.
Not
necessarily.
Oh, then who's online? Okay, that's true. Okay, I guess in person. All right, keep it at 10.
Hello? Can anyone hear me?
Yeah.
We can.
Okay, I had my hand raised and you had moved on, but I didn't.
Sorry.
But I wanted to, I had wanted to bring up the same issue that Erhard brought up regarding elected officials. Although I am aware, because I was on the steering committee early on, I think he was 2 years ago, but Ward 1 sort of was an outlier. Other other NPAs allowed elected officials to serve on the steering committee, but we had felt pretty strongly about it. And the people in the ward felt pretty strongly about it because they wanted it to be an expansion of involvement, not just the same people having a voice over and over again at the NPA and then at the city council. And so I think that's the real fear, that you have just one voice and you don't have as many voices as you could have. So I do agree with maybe adding department heads, but I think we have to be very careful because we are a small community, and you don't want to exclude everybody, and there are some very good people. So department heads is what I heard Earhart suggest, and I heard kind of agreement from at least you, Jonathan. I don't know if others had agreed. But is your intent now to vote on those changes to the proposed bylaws?
Yeah, I'm gonna get all muddled in the rules of order. But we would probably want to put the as presented, get that moved and seconded. Suggest an amendment, get that moved, seconded and approved, and then add it in and then vote on the bylaws. Does that sound okay, or should you just do it all at once?
You should, I would recommend that you move the amendments and then vote on the final draft. That's what I would recommend.
Okay, even though we haven't actually moved and seconded the bylaws as presented.
Right, so I'm looking back at city council where you get a resolution which hasn't really been moved, but it gets amended before it's finally moved. So I've just used that same process.
If hearing no objection, why don't we, Earhart?
With all due respect to Sharon, I think we can combine the two and make it not quite as formal as the city council process. So I'm going to move approval of the bylaws with with an amendment, recommended amendment to eliminate the ability. I'm not going to get the wording right. You can get the wording. You can wordsmith it later. To eliminate participation by the mayor, city council members, school board members, and mayorally appointed department heads, preclude them from being steering committee members.
Seconded.
Great. Moved and seconded. Is there discussion? And Sharon, your hand's still up, but it's probably not still up, right?
Right, I'm done speaking. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Abstentions? I think we have bylaws. Congratulations. Thank you very much. And this will be the last meeting that Ward 1 is intact for history, so, but at least Ward 1 has some.
Thank you, Jonathan. Jonathan, thanks a lot. I think that was very well done. And following now, we have a new steering committee member candidate vote. You want to introduce Carter?
I nominate Carter Newbiser to be an additional steering committee person. Maybe since you've got a new crew of people, if you could just quickly introduce yourself and what you see as an important part of being a steering committee member.
Yeah, my name is Carter Newbiser. I've lived in Burlington since 2017. And I've been trying to find time to carve out to join the NPA for a while now, and I just haven't found it. But the third of my 3 jobs is now over officially. So I'm not getting another part-time gig, and I'm gonna hopefully put time towards this if folks will have me. And yeah, I definitely want to learn the ropes before I start making suggestions, but certainly like my hope, I think 2-3 is a really strong steering committee, or a really strong NPA rather, and the idea of just having food and having like a space like this instead of the more sterile, like UVM hospital room, so that was good for what it was. It's good, so thinking about ways that like we can bring more folks in, and many of you know I've knocked on a bunch of your doors over the years. I would really like us to get more folks from the neighborhood who often don't show up involved in this and see the value in this, and hopefully advocate at some point for some like decision-making authority and funding to go towards the NPA. So that's sort of how I would see the role. And obviously being nonpartisan and opening up space for folks to talk about issues.
We need a second.
I second
All in favor?
it.
Opposed? Hearing none? Welcome aboard. All right, we're moving on to the city council update. Soraya, you're online?
Yes, I'm
You
here.
got the floor.
Amazing. I am sorry that I'm not there in person. Good update though is for the East District race, which obviously Ward 1 is part of. Ben and Karen are still on an ordinance call. We're trying to figure out the ranked choice voting so that we can have that in place for this race, which is great, of course, because we will have 3 candidates, which is an exciting development to both have that many candidates and to be able to use ranked choice voting to vote for them. So apologies that I'm not in there in person, and I might see if ordinance is still meeting when I finish my update. But yeah, so redistricting, I think, is the first thing that I was supposed to talk about. You may have seen some of my front porch forum notes on this, but we really, I think as a council, we're not always as partisan as folks think we are. I think we've been very collaborative on this, tried to figure out what really made the most sense for the city. We don't necessarily love districts. So we thought about, can we have a model? Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Can we have a model where we keep roughly the same amount of counselors, which was the priority of some counselors and the mayor, but reconfigure the districts? There were a lot of things we looked at. We looked at a 6x2 model, a 7x2. Then we kind of started looking at ones that had different types of representation, but we decided that that was no better than what we have now, which of course is the 8 wards for districts. So we started working mostly as a smaller group, which has been Mark Barlow, Ben Traverse, Joe McGee, and myself, because we kind of represent all parts of the city and across the party. And what we got to is to stick to an 8 ward map. So there's a few different configurations of the 8 ward map. We're definitely getting rid of Ward 8 as it's been configured. That was something very early on that we wanted to do, and moving it a little bit more into a downtown ward, which has important implications for Ward 1 and Ward 6. So if you all did get the chance to see, I don't know if there's a way, I don't know who's operating the.
We have the maps, Soraya, so.
Great, fantastic. So if we're looking at oh yeah, great. The maps have, if you're looking at the 4 option map, so the first version has us cut off at that Prospect Street, at Prospect Street, and then kind of, I didn't hear whoever just said.
He's we're trying to bring the map up.
Okay. Great. I'll kind of talk through them, and maybe somebody can slowly scroll through them once that happens. I think the Ward 1 option, so part of what's going on is, as we know, Ward 8 was very student heavy because it kind of intentionally snaked into the East End to capture as many students as possible. And so what the debate has boiled down to now is that we've kind of decided that the 8 ward map keep some of the neighborhoods the best, and this is really the one that we want to focus on, is where do on-campus students go? And that's part of what the difference is between these maps. So great. So in this first one, we've got Ward 1 kind of jutting into a little into downtown. It kind of keeps us somewhat close to what we currently have, but cuts out part of the hill section and puts it into Ward 2. The next map is you can't see it on the map, but what actually changed is we cut some of the west side off, but then I think we actually have a little bit more of on campus. I think it's not on the map, but I think there's like a building across from Highway 2 that sneaks into Ward 1. Then on the next map, it's a slightly bigger chunk. Oh, nope, sorry, I'm getting confused between this and the PowerPoint. So it looks like in option 1, those are just different things. We don't get anything across Highway 2. The third one, which says option 2, is labeled option 2, right? We get a small chunk of what I believe is called athletic campus across the highway. Option 3, we get a bigger chunk of athletic campus if you keep scrolling down, which means we lose a little bit more of the hill section. And then option 3 is just a version 2, also hard to see the differences between those. But then if you go down to option 4, we lose kind of all of Riverside Ave. I'll pause for, yeah, so that's option 3, 2, keep scrolling down. One more. It's really hard to see it. Yeah, and then this is the most drastic where that Riverside chunk is cut out of Ward 1 and we get most of athletic campus. I can just talk through this in the PowerPoint. What that means, the reason this matters to a lot of people is Ward 6 is about to have a lot more students, which Ward 6, as you can see, is that kind of southeastern part of the city. They're about to get a lot more students than they have been because their student population used to be captured into Ward 8, and with us moving Ward 8 into a downtown ward, they're about to get a lot more students. So Ward 1 had 21% on-campus students, Ward 6 had 14%, and Ward 8 had 76%. And that 76% is what folks are mostly looking at changing, is having Ward 8 not be quite so student heavy. Ward 1, which is the option that I liked the most, just in terms of keeping Ward 1 as close to what it has been historically, makes the Ward 6 on-campus student population 77%, which Ward 6 is not excited about. Option 2, and keeps the Ward 1 the same. Option 2 makes Ward 1 33% on-campus student, 68% for Ward 6, and 20% for Ward 8. That's the one that I'm kind of leaning to as a bit of a compromise, not least because Ward 1 does have not amazing voter turnout. We've obviously worked on it over the past few years, and I think there's been some interesting races that has helped with turnout. Of course, my first year, it just also happened to be a presidential election, which that always helps and is independent of what's going on locally. But I am a little bit worried about if we have such a high on-campus population, because Ward 1 has a lot of off-campus students, which Ward 6 does not have. Ward 6 has a lot more single-family homes than this configuration of Ward 1, for example, would have. That I think option 2 is just a good balance in terms of still having a student-heavy ward. I would guess probably about 50%, which I think is a good thing, but not having it be quite as student-heavy as then replicating some of the problems that we heard Keith talk about a lot with Ward 8. But curious to hear what you all think. I know those maps went by kind of quickly, but really the difference is for the first ones, how much of the hill section versus just across the highway for Highway 2 for the athletic campus we have, and then the fourth option being the most drastic, including Riverside in Ward 2.
Comments, questions?
What highway? What's the highway?
Main Street.
Main Street.
State highway, not interstate.
Hill section?
Zariah, the question is, what's technically the hill section?
Yeah, the hill section is the western part of Ward 1. So I don't know if there's official boundaries, but I think we kind of considered everything kind of like between Mater Christi down the hill towards Willard. Yeah, so if you want to zoom in a little bit there.
So that would be from Mansfield to Willard?
Yeah, so we're losing on this one, on some of the things. So if you scroll up towards Ward 1. Yeah, so like those streets that are like on that upper left-hand corner, like how much of those we're losing? That's the hill section.
So could you scroll up till we get the one, Zariah, that you like? I'm just gonna stand up here and point to things so people can see them, because it's hard to see on the map.
Yeah.
So it's option 2.
Yeah, I think option 2 is the most likely. And
Okay, so it's this one. So can you zoom in and move it over so we can?
Yeah.
Jonathan, can you
So
point, yeah, like what street is
So
that?
this is Macaulay Square, Cathedral Square. This is Mansfield. This is Prospect. This is Pearl Street. Yeah, Pearl Street, right?
Mhm.
And that just kind of shows where the divider is.
Pearl, which turns into
So
Colchester.
where it's North Street. So that means.
This is North Street.
So Jonathan, you and I will be in Ward 2.
We would be on this map. Everybody all the way to this highway would be in Ward 2 in this model.
And one more piece of context that I should have said is Ward 1 has to become smaller if we keep in. The reason I originally really liked the 7-ward map is we're the biggest ward by far, which means we're a little bit underrepresented because you just get me for an extra 1,000 people. But if we keep 8 wards, we have to cut Ward 1 because it's so much bigger.
So everything else pretty much stays as is, except that you pick up this piece of campus over here, but all the other borders stay as they are, right?
What's the athletic campus? What is that?
That's over there.
Yeah, that little chunk across
Yeah,
Main
yeah.
Street.
So East Avenue? Are you talking about East Avenue?
No, it's even past East Avenue, because East Avenue I think is a little bit further east towards the woods. So it's across from Main Street. So if you're kind of heading towards I-89 coming from downtown, historically all of Ward 1 has been to the left of you, and it's talking about just adding that small chunk to the right, which I was originally really opposed to, just because I'm like, how are they part of Ward 1? But I think just with us not having the gerrymandered Ward 8 anymore, which I think all of council wants to get rid of, and I think a lot of citizens want to get rid of, it just means that it would be really politically infeasible to put all of that into Ward 6 in terms of not having them be an 80% student ward.
Zariah, that's why we have that outcropping there and the sort of in the bottom.
Yeah, to try to balance the population of students between Ward 1 and Ward 6.
Soraya, this is Sharon Bushor, and I feel that one of the things about redistricting is you're supposed to respect natural boundaries, and I see Main Street as a significant natural boundary. I feel that I understand the issue for Ward 6, but I do believe that when all is said and done, they are going to have fewer students total. I understand they've got the on-campus students, but they don't have students that are off campus. You mentioned that. And my real concern is that what gets gutted out of Ward 1 is the predominantly stable residential neighborhood of Ward 1. And so we then end up with a more renter population and very few homeowners. And I think that that is a factor that I hope redistricting will look at, because I think you're looking for stability. And you already mentioned the fact that voter turnout is an issue. And although it was 2 years ago when I went door to door, I found that it was a turnstile. The renters were no longer long-term renters, they were short-term, and they were only there for a year or two. And so that doesn't bring stability or engagement in a community. And I'm concerned about that.
Yeah, I think you're saying, I agree with you. You're saying all the same things that I said, which I think is the reason that I think option 3, even though it doesn't look very different on the map, is problematic, because even though Ward 6 still has more on-campus students, I do think it would make our on-campus very high. I think that 33% on campus I don't think that's a bad number. I think Ward 1 still has quite a bit of diversity in it. Like, even just looking at my apartment complex, Hildred, it has a lot of graduate students, but it doesn't have, as far as I know, any undergraduate students. We do still have a lot of single family homes in this, as we know, kind of on that eastern side that goes towards Patchen Road. And I think and I agree with you on the natural boundary. The kind of question mark on that is, we don't really have that much, like, your strategy, like if you're a city councilor or school board member, your strategy for talking to students or engaging with students isn't really based on their dorm, right? Because we can't access their dorm anyway. So I think that it truly being just a dorm makes it a little bit different in terms of who's going in. And then the other thing is that hill section, I do know that folks, like, I know that there's kind of like a Mansfield, like, Prospect contingent. And then I know that folks on Loomis and Henry are really close. And so I think we talked about this is, I certainly, like, those are, like, folks, that is a voting block. Like, that is a very big voting block. Those folks, like you said, they turn out for voting a lot, but I think they would rather be moved together than split up. And so that was part, and again, we have to cut somewhere, right? Like, Ward 1 can't stay with the limits that it has. And we're at the edge of the city, so we can't cut to the east or the north, because those are natural limits to Winooski and South Burlington.
Erhard?
Once again, I have to agree with my former seatmate on the city council, with Sharon. I mean, I don't like any of these maps for Ward 1. The area that we're talking about, Henry's, really cutting everything that is, or large parts of the area east of Willard Street off of Ward 1 does not respect historic neighborhood integrity for Ward 1 in the slightest. It violates one of the main principles that is supposed to be adhered to in redistricting. Folks, some of you may have been around long enough to remember there was a study done in the 80s that really focused on the historic nature of the Old North End. It was called West of Willard, North of Pearl. And that really defined historically the Old North End. West of Willard is the Old North End. East of Willard is Ward 1. And that's really the way it ought to be. And taking the Henry Street neighborhood, Loomis Street, all those blocks out of Ward 1 really guts Ward 1 in a way, as someone who's represented Ward 1 on the city council, that I feel just doesn't respect the historic nature of our district. I know I hear you've got challenges. I understand that. I think one of the keys is that Ward 1 used to represent a significant amount of the campus to the west, to the south of Main Street. Ward 1 used to include Living Learning, Marsh, Austin, Tupper, and Harris Mills. And there's a statistical problem with including some of those areas, which I would argue could be included back in Ward 1, but for the fact that the census has created a huge census block that needs to basically be broken up in order to create fairness between Ward 6 and Ward 1 in terms of the numbers of students. And I guess I would just ask you, those who are drawing the lines on the map, to look at breaking up that very large census block. It has 2,600 people in it. And
So Earhart, sorry, just because I want to get your answer to this, I'm going to interrupt. I hope that's okay. Which is that we did break up the block, right? So that block, that campus block, is we're taking parts of it. So my question is, there's no way in Ward 8. So either we take part of that neighborhood out or we take all of it out if we have an 8-ward map, because Ward 1 is too big. And so the only way to keep Ward 1 north of Willard, east of Willard, north of Pearl, is to have a 7-ward map, which I don't think I'm good. I don't think we got the votes for that, because the old North End and new North End counselors don't like that because it takes a chunk of the. So I guess my question is, what knowing that there's no 8-ward map that makes that work, even with splitting up the census block, what would you like to see?
I guess what I would like to see actually is probably a 7-ward map. Or each of, maybe I missed this, but are each of the wards represented by 2 city councilors? So there's a 16-member council. I missed that part.
Yeah, that part's up for question. I think we're going to try to push this as a 8x2, so 8 wards, 2 counselor map. And if that fails, maybe we'll stick back with the district and ward model.
So a total of 16?
Right, 16 or staying with 12.
Yeah, okay. I guess what I thought might be possible is an 8-ward map where 2 of the wards are represented by 1 counselor and the rest by 2. And that would give the New North End 3 counselors, which it currently has. And it would give a smaller Ward 8 that's focused in the downtown area, 1 counselor.
Yeah, and I should talk about. Thank you, Erin. To talk about the process, yeah. So we, I originally thought the same thing. I don't think it was 8, but I think it was a 5-ward map where there were 2 counselors and 2 where there was 1. So similar, but not quite the same thing. Where the boundaries did work out really well. A lot of folks, including some of the folks who are on the room with you, really didn't like that, and it felt like we were trying to get away from the 8-ward district, and maybe we should put it back on the table. But so it was similar. It kept all the options, kept 12 counselors, kept neighborhoods more intact. I think it would have kept Ward 1 closer to what it is now. I'd have to go back and look at it. A lot of folks didn't like that. They thought that it was really unfair that some folks would just get 1 representative and other folks got 2. So that just became enough of an issue when at least some of the surveys showed that 2 wards, that folks wanted to have 2 representatives, that we decided to abandon that model.
Hey, Zariah, I'm interrupting because what's the next step? We only have a few minutes left to talk about this here. Is there going to be another public meeting where people can voice their opinions, or how do we move forward?
Yes. So I'm not 100% sure because it depends on, so yes, there is another public meeting, and that it's coming to the city council, the next city council on Monday, where the working group is presenting why we chose the 8-ward model and giving these same things that you're looking at to the council and letting them give feedback. based on that, we might have another smaller working group, which again is those 4 counselors that I named, including myself. Or we'll just move forward with that being enough direction for the map makers.
Okay,
So definitely continue to give me personally feedback by email for what folks want. I think that this is going to be hard because I think that not, like I said, there's folks in the room who would very much disagree with Earhart on having a 1 vote representative. I think there's no good answer. I agree. I really like the 7 ward map. I think unfortunately it only made sense for Ward 1 and not for the other wards.
Any final comments?
Yeah.
Richard?
Right
there.
So one thing that I put forward 10 years ago, whenever we were involved in redistricting, and I mentioned it again this time, but no one seems to give it any traction, is keep roughly the ward configuration that we had 10 years ago. So that's 7 wards with 2 councillors. My suggestion was meld Ward 6 and Ward 1 together, so that you've got 90% of the university. You're following? And you would have
Build Ward 1 and Ward 6 together.
You would have 5 councillors for those 2 wards. 2 would be dedicated to 1 ward, 2 would be dedicated to another, and the other one would be an at-large councillor.
Yeah, and that's
arithmetically, that works out pretty well. And it also neutralizes to some degree the student issue that is so problematic, apparently.
Yeah, one of the proposals is definitely, and I think folks don't again like the different number of wards versus not, but there is a thing where we could just have 4 districts with 3 counselors each, which would get to a similar place and make the boundaries and the students a little bit harder. I think other folks had a really hard time with that because some folks wanted us to have 12 single ward districts, and the smaller it is, they felt like they wanted the wards to become smaller so that they felt like they had more close, that it was a closer representation. And so I think the melding problem, one, for fairness, again, I think folks would want us to do that for the whole city then, and then that just means you've got bigger city council races, which the last slew of races, we already had people raise between $15,000 and $20,000 for ward races, which is just, it starts to become very, like, almost like very large races, which can be very hard. And
there would only be one.
Say it again.
Only one of those races would be larger than what we have at the moment. Anyway, I'll drop you a line and say.
Okay.
Okay. Well, the other thing is you've got to prepare for the fact that the mayor is not going to go for anything more than 14 councillors in a month of Sundays. So you've got to go to plan B for that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think before, and somebody else emailed me and said, hey, stop thinking about what the mayor will veto and just do what makes sense. But with us being 2 councillors down and knowing that some of the folks agree with him, that starts to make the veto, that overriding of vetoes look very unlikely.
Hey, Zariah, thanks a lot for giving us an update. If people want to get deliver ideas to you, they should use your counselor email address.
Counselor email, counselor phone number. You can text me or call me. Calling is a little harder, obviously, in terms of me being available just then, but call me or text me or email me.
Okay, thanks. We're gonna move on because we're a little bit behind schedule. Mila?
Yes.
I know you've been waiting a long time.
No, it's no problem, and give you the agenda and I'll let you know when I need it. Thank you so much. I.
Should put a piece of tape on it, Gloria.
I know.
Thank you for having me. My name is Mila Brandt. I serve on the Police Commission. I'm year 2 into a 3-year term. I previously served on the Committee to Review Policing Policies. I also served on various joint committees between the Commission and the city's Public Safety Committee, reviewing the RFPs for the consultants that research community engagement, and also the CNA consultant that reviewed the police department. So I have been knee deep in it. I'm going to actually change my presentation a little bit based on some earlier questions and discussions. So I think that I want to educate people as to where to find information, because we talk a lot about the numbers. What are the numbers really? So I want to dive into that. First, I'm going to cover some general things, and what I was just talking about over here is, let's bring up the chief's report, which is presented once a month. In general, your Burlington Police Commission is represented by people across different wards. As I mentioned, I'm in Ward 3, and I think currently we do have representation in almost all of the wards. One of the things that we've been talking about ad nauseum is public engagement, public engagement, public engagement. So I'm kind of saying, hey, let's get out more to the NPAs. So here I am. Our police commission meetings are held once a month. They are generally held on the 4th Tuesdays of the month. The schedule for the meetings can be found online. Go to the city's website, click on calendar, government meetings, and you'll see not only police commission, but all your commissions, as well as your city council commissions. And when you click on the meeting date, there's always an area to click on the agenda, which takes you to what is called board docs. And you can see the agenda for the meeting, for the meetings. You can see the minutes for the meetings, and you can see any attachments of various reports that are discussed during the meetings. So that's how, in general, you get to information. So a couple of quick things I want to talk about is number one, See, Click, Fix. We all have heard of it. I hope if you have not, it's a pretty crucial app. And the reason I mention it now is because of the massive amount of drug use that we have going on in Burlington. Needles are everywhere. The best way to properly, safely dispose of needles is to use See, Click, Fix, report it that way, and they will come and pick them up. Also regarding drugs, there is an online tip line. So when you go to the city's website, click on the departments tab, click police department, and right on that page under the modified BPD priority response plan, which you can click on and find out more about that response plan if you're not familiar with it. But there is an area that says reporting any and all suspicious activity helps to solve and prevent crime, suspicious or drug activity. It says call dispatch or submit tips online. Don't call dispatch. Dispatch is not going to get you anyone that's going to come stop a drug deal. That's the reality of our situation, and it's actually been that way for a very, very long time. It was one of the reasons that there was a lot of distrust and anger in the community when drug issues in certain wards were not, quite frankly, being addressed. But that tip line is crucial, because what it does is it helps the police department track where drug activity is occurring. You will be asked to provide the names and addresses of individuals if you know them. So for example, sometimes people live next to houses that are unfortunately the sites of large amounts of activity. And so they report comings and goings. If you can report cars, especially out of state, we have a lot of issues with out of state individuals coming in, selling drugs in our community. If you can safely get license plates,
time of day, location. This information is tracked to help the department make a determination as to where they need to focus investigations. Okay, dispatch is shorthanded too, not just not having enough officers. There's not enough people working dispatch, which is why when some people say that their calls aren't being answered or their calls aren't being stacked based on the priority response plan, that's, I believe, personally part of the issue. The police commission meetings, in general, we receive a chief's report from Acting Chief Murad, which I want to review in a little bit more detail momentarily. We do updates from the commission based on things that we are working on, directive updates, working on the complaint policy, oversight projects, and also we have speakers and various presentations. A review of use of force incidents, although the report that you have access to does not include the names of any individuals. It has general descriptions of what occurred, age and race of the individual, and gender if identified. Most of our review, quite frankly, of use of force occurs in executive session. Most of our work is in executive session. And when you see us pushing back on certain things publicly, it's because of things that we're dealing with in executive session, but we're not allowed to talk about that with you. So there has to be a little bit of faith in that we are, I hear a lot, it's like, oh, you guys are complaining about every little thing. We do not have the time to focus on little things. We do not. So I would say like right now, 2/3 of our time, over half is in executive sessions. I watch a lot of body cam footage in what little spare time that I have. So I see things that are not okay. So these things that led to the vote, the call for different positions, especially for CSLs, social workers who could deal with mental health issues because that's exploded, social workers who could help deal with substance abuse issues because that has exploded. Future agenda items and commendations. People who have positive experiences with police officers. We want to hear those stories and we will talk about them publicly at the meeting. We had a mental health summit, not actually us, but the police commission, based on the explosion of mental health issues. Mental health issues drive a lot of what we see. Drug abuse issues, substance abuse issues drive a lot of what we see. So when we talk about the increase of crimes of opportunity, we talk about the larcenies, the increase in stolen cars. These are happening because of drug abuse. They're happening because of people trying to find something that's going to help them get their next fix. A lot of people who've had their cars stolen report if they get it lucky enough to get it back, that there's drug paraphernalia in it. The police departments reported finding stolen cars with people passed out in them. So we have all these larcenies, but we have the root causes of mental health and drugs. And as we can all imagine, if you have mental health issues, let's say you need medications, you don't have the stability or the help to stay on your medications, and you get in trouble, and you get arrested, and you get put in jail. Well, that's just going to make your situation not stable. Then you throw in homelessness, right? Because people with mental health issues or drug abuse issues are more likely to be homeless. So it is all related. So if someone says, oh, the police commission's not addressing these things, we are well addressing these things. We are just trying to say we have to be looking at the root causes, because incarceration is a very temporary solution. It is not the end game. And if you incarcerate someone without giving them help with their addiction or without dealing with their mental health issue, when they're released, what happens, right? And we've seen that over and over again. We have group of people in our community who are quote unquote repeat offenders due to these very issues. So on August 23rd and 4th, the city of Burlington, along with United Way of Northwestern Vermont, hosted a virtual mental health summit. This included 65 attendees over the course of 2 days, learned about our local system, care from the Howard Center's school-based clinicians, their crisis services, and age well. Discussions were centered on what role the city has in supporting the local system of care and affecting the necessary changes to increase access and services for all of Chittenden County. This is crucial reading. It is crucial reading for everyone who, I think we all need to understand this issue and where we are at and where we need to go. I will be emailing this out so that it gets posted with your minutes and you can read it at your leisure. The Police Commission did our annual report. It contains statistics. It contains summaries of the directives that we were working on, including our vote to say, hey, please do this mental health summit because it's needed in our city. It has a summary of the different speakers that we've had where we try to educate people on the different issues that are occurring in Burlington. Also things like officer wellness, informed trauma from an officer's point of view, as well as the public's point of view, to make people understand what officers are going through when they're out there, because they have to deal with some really, when they drug ODs, suicides, the shootings that we have, and other violent acts. Shootings can stop tomorrow. We don't need to have one more shooting. Someone emailed me, said, someone's beaten to death with a baseball bat. Why isn't that in the news? We have violence occurring, period. So we need to be addressing all of that. That report also crucial reading so that you understand what your commission is doing, the issues that are being covered, and look at the numbers. These numbers are provided by the city statistician. Our May meeting reviewed their report. I will email that report too, so that you can read it at your convenience in more detail. What else do we have? We had a presentation from Vermont Interfaith Action, and they did a guide to community engagement in local police departments. I'll also email that. I thought it was a really great introduction talking about what we expect as a community from policing across the state of Vermont, and also what policing should include. Very good read. I'll strongly recommend that. And now, if you wouldn't mind putting up the chief's report, the other thing that is reviewed each meeting is a report that is given by the chief. Yes, if you click on that, and thank you. So the chief presents this once a month at the meetings. This is crucial viewing, and I recommend sometimes that people view it with the sound off, because I believe these reports have crucial information, but sometimes when we're talking about the politics of the situation, sometimes it's just too much politics, too many games being played with the numbers, and let's just give the people the information that they need. If you can go to the next page, and we'll kind of go through the pages. This is keeping track of the sworn officer count. Officers continue to leave. One of my big issues I talk about frequently is lack of public engagement. We got into this situation because we didn't have proper engagement with our department. It's a two-way street. You cannot force people to trust police or respect police. It has to be earned, especially given some of the situations that we have. We still have 2 outstanding use of force cases involving Black bodies that have dragged on for years. That's not okay. You want to take a positive step, resolve that, and other things too. So I always talk about that. Officers are leaving because they don't feel wanted or respected. No one fired them. They left of their own accord. So how do we fix that? We need lateral transfers to build this department back. But if you're an officer in another area and you want to stay in the profession but move somewhere else, there's a lot of competition for jobs, including in the Northeast. So in addition to the salary increases, the sign-on bonuses, we have to be working on improving the environment, because if you Google Burlington, Vermont, what are you going to see? Right? So if you're an officer that wants to come here, which we want people to do that, because we can't just have new officers coming fresh out of the academy, it has to be a mix. It's crucial. So these numbers continue not to look great. I would like to see some more engagement. I have a lot of ideas about that. If you'd like to talk about it, please reach out to me. Not enough time tonight. Next page, please. This is a summary of the revised priority response plan. If you've never looked at it, crucial viewing tells you what are considered priority 1, 2, and 3. This means that you might call something in and it's stacked. Like if someone is not in immediate danger, you're not necessarily going to get an officer right away, but if it's stacked, you should get someone to reach back out to you. Now, of course, we've all heard the stories where that is not happening. I don't know how to prove what the extent of this problem is. But it is a concern. So if no one gets back to you, I would use the online incident reporting. This is different from the drug tip line, but the online incident reporting makes sure that what you're concerned about gets reported. Next page, please. Okay, incident volumes, right? We hear a lot of stuff about the numbers. What are the numbers really? So the numbers are, if we take a look at trends over the last several years, going back to 2017, incident is down, although 22 is up from the previous year. Now, 2020 and 2021 were COVID years. So the beginning of 2022 through now, we're in our new normal, right? We're out of COVID, we got the vaccines, so we're starting to see the incidents go up. But when you look at the total incidents, they've trended down. And at the very bottom, it talks about the number of incidents, roughly 16%, that have been stacked according to the priority response plan. So if it wasn't a priority 1 incident, that meant you might not have gotten your immediate response, but you should have eventually gotten a response. Next page, please. So this is selected Valcourt incidents. Valcourt, in a nutshell, is a program that's used by the police department to track incidents. I personally have a lot of issues with Valcourt. It has some limitations. And it doesn't always track. One of the things I found out as a commissioner is that there are some things that our officers do that aren't properly tracked, and that's a problem. And that is something long range that we really need to think about, because we should be able to have a really full idea of what officers are doing. I'll give you an example. You have an officer who might follow up on an incident. Kid borrows a family car. Kid's supposed to be home by a certain time. Kid doesn't show up. Family's like texting, calling. Kids aren't responding. Family reports the car stolen. Please find a kid in another town with a car, bring it back to the family. Now we got to follow up. Do you really want to pursue or press charges, right? That's a follow-up. That's something an officer has to do. But he can't log in Valcourt. If he does that, he or she makes themselves unavailable for another call, and they don't want to do that. So they're out there doing some work that's not actually counted. Does everyone kind of follow what I'm saying there? That's a concern to me. That's a concern to me, especially when you're complaining that everything's not being tracked, but how do we fix that? How do we fix that? So just wanted to throw that out there. So this is a very interesting page, once again, going back to 2017 and tracking various things. Now we have some things pretty much holding steady, some things down. Larceny, big jump. Larceny, drugs, addiction, right? The crime that accompanies that. Mental health, big jump. overdoses, big jump and probably undercounted. Robberies, slight jump, sexual assault, holding the same, stolen vehicles, big jump. The stolen vehicles, this is all across the state, and this is easy pickings. Too many of these vehicles are not locked. Too many of these vehicles have things in them that are visible, that encourage people to try to get into them. People will leave their car running with their keys in while they run and get a coffee at a convenience store. There are literally people waiting at these convenience stores to just run in, take the car, drive away, people come in with a coffee. Oh my God. This is what is happening. Are some of the cars forcibly broken into? Yes, but a large percentage are us not recognizing, the times that we're living in. And I never thought I really felt for some time, and I came here 40 years ago when y'all living your doors up. I'm like, what are you doing? This is insane. But people are doing that. You really can't do that anymore. Wards 2 and 3, we've always had problems with crimes of opportunity. So we were kind of ready for that. But now it's all over the city, right? It's all over the city. They go, they figured out to lock their doors. And, let's go someplace else. So they haven't figured that out yet. That's kind of what's happening. That's really what's happening. So some of these things that we see increases in, it's related to the drug activity. And it's larceny, but why is someone breaking in and taking things, right? People are using these cars to sleep in, to use in, and other or worse. Oh, appreciate that. Next page. Okay, 5-year averages at the bottom, gunfire, stolen vehicle. Hey, Bennington, did everyone read about Bennington? Bennington has what, a third of the population? They have 17 gunfire incidents year to date. Yeah, so it's not just us. Now, that doesn't necessarily make us feel better that it's not just us, but it should keep the politics out of it. This is not because of some vote. This is bigger. And we need to be aware of what's going on around us in our state, in our country. And we need to know what other solutions people are trying, right? We need to be keeping up on that to know what's being successful in other places. And can we try, or can we do something different? We need to have that. And the next page, I don't think there's too much after this. Gunfire incidents. This is a pretty interesting graph, color-coded. White is a gunfire incident. The light blue is a gunfire incident known to be at a person, a gunfire incident where a person is struck, i.e. a shooting, and a gunfire incident where someone was killed. The very bottom is the current year. I do believe the murder-suicide that we had, that was something very different and should not have been lumped in with the others. It should have been discussed differently. And I think there was a failure of leadership there. And then I think the last two are related to building back the department. And you can just kind of flip through those, talking about, this is the total numbers of officers, the total number of patrols. They are maintaining detectives. They don't want to move detectives to the road because we need detectives doing the investigation, finding out who's responsible for some of these drug rings and drug activity, finding out who's responsible and capturing people who are doing shootings and the killings. So that's very, very important. And if you can scroll down through the rest of it, building back the capacity, currently 6 CSOs, 3 CSLs as of this report. And scrolling down again, the CSLs have been crucial. They allow an officer, if it's a nonviolent situation, an officer can be released to follow up on something else while a CSL works with an individual who needs services that don't require a sworn officer, who doesn't have the training to deal with that. Tiers of response, that's worth reading at your leisure. And if you can scroll down, I think we're near the end. If not, recruitment officer has been training. This drove me crazy because we know we don't have good records as to who actually got what training. That came out in the CNA report, that has come up a number of times at police commission meetings where we're talking about racial disparities. So I feel this is a little bit, but happy to talk further if anybody's interested. And we scroll down there, This is the new contract, starting pay, top pay, hiring bonuses, part of the build back. And if you could scroll down, and that's it. So I thought it was important. I wasn't going to go, I was going to mention that we do the chief's report, but based on what people were talking about earlier and the questions that they had earlier, I felt that it definitely warranted viewing the whole thing. It is a very important report. Although I don't always agree with how it's presented, right? Because we don't want the manipulation of numbers. We don't want the politics. We want to see what's actually happening. But it's available to you once a month. And if you have problems finding it, let me know. I will download a copy and make sure that's emailed as well. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
We're sort of out of time for questions.
Sure.
But I think there are questions.
Yep.
So can we get you to come back?
I would love to come back. I would love to come back. I
And
would
we'll
love.
put you much further ahead in our
I will do, and
agenda.
people can email questions ahead of time too, and so maybe, you know, depending on the categories of
Okay.
questions. I would
That would
definitely
be
do
great.
that, and we're looking to have more of a presence so that we are talking to people and providing this information, because that's a big thing. I hear it a lot. People do, where do I find this? How do I know what's going on? So
That would be
yeah.
great.
Thank you again very much. And I'll be hanging out if anybody has any questions afterwards. megrant@burlingtonbt.gov is my police commission email address. Thank you.
Thanks. We have one more item in our agenda. It's a presentation by SD Ireland for Apple Grove Development. And do you need a hand for someone to hold that up?
Do we have, you have the slides for this too, or were they included? Okay, if you just put the slides on, it's the same information.
Okay.
And then if people want a packet, I'm gonna.
Sure. I'll hand them out.
Yeah, I might not have enough for everyone, but hopefully everyone needs. Going to need one, we can share a couple. Want one? Yeah. And I'll kind of just keep it brief and keep moving forward here, because I know we don't have a lot of time. My name is Nick Smith. I'm with SD Ireland, discussing the Apple Grove project, which is located at 284 Grove Street. This is right on the South Burlington line. This is probably, I'm trying to think, about a quarter mile to the east of the Bayberry project that SD Ireland has done over the last 5 years or so. This was a project that was originally constructed around 2000. All of the homes are modular homes. They are all single family except for, and I'll just kind of point up here, this unit in red. These are the old units, all the red here. So this is an old apartment building with 3 units. And the rest are all just single family modular homes, single floor, they're kind of reaching their end of life. So, and some of the infrastructure is beginning to, it's been taking a toll on. So, I think this is a prime opportunity to come in, do a redevelopment, maybe maximize some of the density in here so that we can kind of meet some of the housing needs and, match some of the newer development that's happened in the area recently as well. The units, and I've got some examples of the Bayberry units, which are the same condo units that you can see are actually on the Grove Street. Again, about a quarter mile down from here, kind of the same setup where they have, access directly on Grove Street, but there's no driveways coming into them. And so it'll be kind of a similar situation where you still have the remaining access of this loop, and then all of the units themselves are fed off of those, this loop access. So nothing is coming on from Grove Street, no additional driveways, just connections to the existing sidewalk. So in total right now, there's 15 units plus the 3 apartment buildings, so that's 18 total units. And we're proposing 13 duplexes, which would be 26 units. 4 of these would be inclusionary units under the required regulations. And this is meeting density based on the parcel this general parcel here, and I think there's a small portion of parcel that's across Grove Street, so. And with that, I guess what we're really here for is to get a little bit of feedback on this project generally, answer some questions. We understand that it's really conceptual for us. We haven't even met with the city or anything yet at this point, so we want to get a little feedback, see if we need to course correct it all, and then take it from there. And we'll probably present this to the city in the upcoming days, where we have a technical review committee meeting tomorrow. We'll get some feedback there, and we'd like to take the two, kind of mesh them together and see what we can do while still, making this a feasible endeavor at the same time. Great, let's jump right into it, if that works.
First, congratulations on your new baby.
Oh, thank you, yeah.
I think you might have just said this, and I was like, looking at the pictures instead. How many of these units are condos and how many of these are apartments?
Yeah, so currently it's 15 modular single family units with 3 apartments in the center building. There's one there. And the proposal is 13 condo units. So 26.
So you end up 26, there's 30 now, and it'll be,
There's
12,
15 now total.
15 condos. It will be
15 to 26 is the number.
Great.
Yeah, that works
for me. I'm a big fan of home ownership, starting at the bottom, because that's the only way you can build wealth and intergenerational wealth.
Jacob, you got a question?
Yeah, I'm curious about the folks who are in the units currently. How, like, the process of looping them in and where they're going in the meantime, and do they get first dibs on what's new?
So there's a certain number of units already that are vacant. Just number one, because of, like we talked about, end of life. We've also, some just have not renewed on leases or and things like that. So there are some. There's obviously still plenty of people still living there. And this is a process that, I think it's a standard process. I don't typically deal with that portion of it. I'm the site engineer, sorry about that. So, but, I think typically it's a year to plus long process to begin notifications. I mean, I don't think we'd even start that process until we're farther along with, getting approvals with the city. So realistically, maybe a 2-year, before we would see even a shovel on the ground or something like that. That would be an ideal time frame, probably.
Can I weigh in?
Yeah, Sharon.
Yes, so my name is Sharon Busher, and I used to represent this ward. And so the last time I was at that complex was in 2020. That is a close-knit, family-oriented group of houses. Modular, yes. I would say some did not look end of life in 2020. I'm really concerned. It's not like I don't like SD Ireland, because you do so much for the community. But, with Bayberry Common, we asked if there would be some family units, and no. And I'm not sure I really like the idea of the duplexes. Sound good, but I really think that I want this to be family oriented. And I'm really worried. Jake asked the question about the displacement of some of those people that live there. I understand there's a process, but we have people that don't have places to live. We know the affordability factor, and the sheer thought of displacing people, knowing that there's limited places where they can go, is very troubling. And I would like to think that SD Ireland would think long and hard about a process that would maybe update or remove some of those houses that are vacant and do the new construction, and then allow the people that are there already to maybe have an opportunity to, I guess, buy them or rent them. I'm not quite sure. I didn't hear that answer if the question was raised. But I am very concerned about this project. And that old building that was an apartment house was actually the original structure, and there used to be horses that were raised there. So it was a home. It wasn't an apartment house. It was a home that was made into an apartment house. So there's a lot of history there, some of which some long-term residents know. But I really would like to think that we are going to be more humane and provide housing that's needed for families in Burlington. We don't do much of that. And I'm hoping that SD Ireland in this development will step up and do the right thing.
Yeah, I appreciate the comment. Let me try to address some of it, and some of it is just really something I have to take into consideration and make sure that it's on the record, and I appreciate that as well. You know, yes, I think that we agree that, you know, condo units, it depends on the family. That for some that is you know, a family unit, and there are plenty of families that live in condo units now. You know, at the same time, is it you know, not everyone, we're picturing maybe like a single family unit. I mean, that's something that we've kind of taken a look at as well. The problem here really is that, you know, we really do have a small area that we're trying to maximize, not only obviously for feasibility based on the cost of construction right now, but also to, like we talked about, address the housing crisis that there is in Burlington, trying to get as many units as we can in that location. I mean, you'll see that these buildings are really, you know, they are 2-story units, and they're kind of the same footprint as the modular units themselves, with you know, attached garages. So you know, we're really trying to, you know, without coming in and putting in these multifamily buildings, you know, 22 units like at Bayberry, come in and kind of meet in the middle, provide these smaller units, kind of maximize the density. That way we can maximize the housing up here. And
so I just want to say one other thing. We have a housing crisis, but people leave out the one key word, an affordable housing crisis. And so just creating more units doesn't really solve the problem if it's not affordable. So thank you.
All right, and that I think is going to be our last question for tonight. We're way over time, and I appreciate everyone's patience.
Yeah,
and participation.
If people want to, I have my email on there. Please email me questions. That way, you know, if I find that we're warranting another meeting, maybe we can reach out and come back for another meeting.
Yes.
Like that. And maybe it's in a couple of months when we've already got a little bit of a feel with the city as well. So I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Thanks.